Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Monday, the 17th day of July, 2017. I trust that everyone had a wonderful weekend, that you enjoyed whatever it was that you did over the weekend. Some people may have taken the opportunity to visit the port, where the Port Authority had been a big shindig out there on the weekend for families and stuff like that. When I crossed there, lots of people in that area. Trust that nothing dramatic happened over the weekend. Road accidents, anything like that. Anyone who's been hurt, we trust that everything will be okay with them. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and you can join me and my co-hosts, Dr. Steve McPhail and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. 9 times out of 10, who is that? Beautiful voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and the 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. I know there are lots of people who probably have birthdays today, but there is one unique person who has a birthday today, and that is the devil. Now, a lot of you probably believe that the devil didn't have a birthday, but yes, the devil, Mr. Ivan Farrington's birthday is today. So we want to wish him a very, very happy birthday and hope that he may live to see many, many more. And all of his family members, everyone wants to give him a big shout out and say you have a hell of a day today, Mr. Ivan. So with that, my co-host this morning, Miss Teresa, welcome back. You didn't go as far away from us as you did the last time, but welcome back. Dr. McPhail, welcome again. Hope you had a great weekend as well.
Thank you. I did have a good weekend. A great weekend this weekend, and welcome. Glad to be back with you and co-host Teresa and all of your listeners locally and your listeners abroad.
Excellent. Before we start, and I want to remind our listening and viewing audience that we're continuing our discussion on the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association's observers for the elections in the Cayman Islands, not only the recent elections, but also the election in 2013, because we want to look at the recommendations that were made in 2013. We started out on Friday, and we started to go over those recommendations which we had acted upon and those that we did not yet or choose to act upon. And we're going to do the same thing with the 2017 recommendations as well. And before we do that, Dr. McPhail, we have some additional correspondence that we did not read on Friday. And we received one from a listener, and I'd like you to just read what that listener had to say as well.
Yeah, we received another communique from a visitor and I would just like to read it. And it says, "Dear OC, I wanted to add a couple of things to what was passed through to you and Dr. Steve early from a person. I don't mind telling you, I am hopping mad at the level of disrespect shown by the observers towards Cayman and his people. Clearly, they attach zero value to Caymanian culture. It's staggering. One would need to have this warp-minded set to dream up the reckless suggestion that any Tom, Dick, or Harry who comes to Cayman to work and is not in possession of citizenship should be afforded the privileges of voting to decide who should be an MLA and by process the Premier. I will be writing to the head of the delegation, who is from the Isles of Man, to express to him personally my disgust that he should be parted to this. He, of all persons, one would imagine, could be expected to appreciate the importance of ensuring the preservation of Cayman's culture." So that was what we the communique that we got from a listener just last Friday afternoon.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that. Now, when we looked at the 2013 the final report and their recommendations, the question of equal suffrage, we indicated that we had acted on those recommendations, and as a result of that, we had one person, one vote. We also ended up with single-member constituencies. On the right to vote, we had not done anything with that, and we see that repeated again here, and that is a bone of contention. And many people take offense to the suggestions that they have made in relation to non-Caymanians having the ability to vote. The right to stand for elections, that was not done as well. And then the next one after that was the independent electoral management body. The electoral management body. We have heard people like Mr. MLA, Mr. Ard McLean, as well as Mr. Ezra Miller, talk about the fact that we need to establish in the Cayman Islands an electoral commission. I was doing some research again on the weekend, and small jurisdictions like Montserrat has an electoral commission. They have a much smaller voting population that we have, but they have established an electoral commission that oversees elections and supervises, and has their remit includes the supervision of the supervisor of elections. We have talked about the fact that here it still remains under the purview of the governor, and that becomes questionable, just the mere appearance of it. I even know that at one point in time they were even considering moving the elections office from its current location and relocate it in the government administration building. And again, we vociferously objected to that, because the mere appearance of any sort of collusion with the government in terms of being at that location, was in itself concerning. So we, strictly oppose that as well. So we have not yet established. Now, have we heard much talk about it from the government side? Yes, we have heard other members of the Legislative Assembly say that it is needed, but we have not heard any talk from the government side in relation to that. Any comments?
Yeah, the comment that I would like to make is that we do not change because change is necessary. We change when we're forced to do so. And that is always a reactionary change that we have. So there should be an independent electoral commission to run the elections and to supervise the elections, and it should not be part of the central government at all. It should be separate from central government. And there was a nucleus for that for electoral commission, when yourself and Corina Gomez and Mr. McCoy and Mr. The other gentleman, I forgot his name, Mr. Scott, Colfer Scott, all were there. And, you know, when something like that came up before, Duncan Taylor disbanded the whole elections office and sent you guys out of the door.
Sent us packing.
Sent you packing out the door. And for nearly 2 or 3 years, there was only about one person in the elections office tried to run the elections office until when this new one person, one vote came and single member constituencies, and then they tried to do something about it, which Mr. Howell did fairly well. But that is, I remember when we, in the court system, when we had the inspector of police as bailiff of the Grand Court. And that just back in 1974. And when I came as clerk of the courts, we changed that. And they couldn't believe that they were doing something wrong. And when I wrote to the government and says, listen, there's nothing in the judicial law that says that a police officer should be carrying out bailiff duties, because he's not part of the court system. And we have one old relic of that left in the court system, and that is when juries are retired, they're still handing the juries over to the police for their safety. That the police is a party to the case in court when it's a criminal matter, and it should be the marshals of the court that supervise the jurors in the court, not the police, not a police officer. That should go too. And another thing that bothers me is the lack of independence of the Legislative Assembly. And the Legislative Assembly is still controlled, I understand, by the Deputy Governor's office. Under that, the Legislative Assembly should be a department on its own, and it should not be controlled by the Deputy Governor. The Speaker of the Legislative Assembly should be head of that department, should be head of that the assembly. So there are all of these things that we need to clear up to put ourselves in the 21st century. And unless we talk about them on places like this radio, we're not going to get any actions unless we keep vociferously mentioning them every time that we get a chance to do so.
So here's what they said about the in 2013 about independent election management body. Establishing an independent election management body with independent budgetary financing could further increase the public confidence in the election process. A broad public and political consensus would be needed to define the qualification criteria, selection process, and terms of reference for the members of such an independent body. Mr. Risa, do you think that's a challenge for the Cayman Islands when you consider the size of the jurisdiction?
No, I have to concur with what Steve said, and bearing in mind, and this morning, well, first of all, thanks very much for giving us the opportunity to appear, and I have to apologize because I didn't come prepared to discuss this morning. But so a lot of what I say will be on the basis of what we're discussing among us and what I retrieve from time to time from my own personal notes on things like this.
And your experience as a candidate as well.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. But yeah, without a doubt. And in fact, as I listened to Dr. Macfield speak, I was thinking we have the perfect opportunity to do that now. And here's the reason why. And I know, and I'm going to invite us as an audience to have an open mind with what I'm about to suggest. And again, listening to what Dr. Macfield said, we now have someone like the former Premier, Mr. Bush, that is now Speaker of the House. He comes with a tremendous body of experience. I suspect that there are very, very, very few people that will know the standing orders, etc., as well as he does. And we've had someone like Miss Mary and Mr. Anthony, who have had experience and so on. So can we not use those folks that we know have the experience, organize a group, and I mean, don't wait until something crazy happens before we do it. Mm-hmm. We now have this ripe opportunity. Let us develop exactly what has been recommended. And it shouldn't be that costly to set up a body that is sufficiently independent and ensure that it is orchestrated in a way that maximizes the use of the expertise that we have and funding, yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My co-host in the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. Please stay tuned. We're going to a commercial break, and For the Record will return immediately after. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, my two co-hosts this morning, Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. We're discussing the 2013 Commonwealth Parliamentary Association observers to the Cayman Islands elections in 2013. We're going over the recommendations that they made, and we're highlighting those recommendations that we acted upon and those that we chose not to act upon. We're now on the topic of voter and civic education, and their recommendation in 2013 was that a comprehensive and effective voter and civic education program carried out well in advance of any electoral event would ensure that all citizens are informed about all necessary elements of the election process, starting from registration of electors to the precise location of polling stations and voting modalities. That became even more prominent in 2017 because we had changes to our electoral system. We had one person, one vote. We had single member constituencies. There was talk on this show and I'm sure on other shows as well, but I can speak for the record that we kept insisting that these are things that need to be done as early as possible. Now, in some respects, the administrators' hands were tied. They were simply because of the need for legislation to come into effect first before they could do anything about it. So there was definitely a need for that. But even with that, at the end of the day, we saw that I think it was something like less than 1% or maybe 1% of the votes that were cast were rejected or spoiled votes as well. And that compared to 2013 when I think it was 0.9% of it. So definitely we need to have that education, voter and civic education. Who wants to take that up? Ms. Teresa?
I was busy here thinking through my thoughts about campaign financing because obviously that was the other
the other
that
one.
came
okay,
in.
let Dr. Steve take the education.
That is a problem that we have, and Orit, with all due respect to you, and all due respect to the recommendations, we do not even educate our own people to get economic benefit in our society, and so to start talking about voter and civic education, that is far-fetched. Something that had been done 40 years ago is still lacking today. And because I read some of the comments in the different media, and how people are talking about, for instance, the difference between the number of people voting in East End and the number of people voting in North Side, and the number of people voting in Bordentown East, and the number of people voting in Cayman Brac. And if you had civic education and people were going out into the districts or coming onto the radio like we are doing, because I think we are the only people that are doing it outside of the electoral office when just for the election they try to fill in as much of the information as they could. But if you had voter and civic education, people would understand why East End and Northside have less people voting than for instance the one that they're using now as an example, Bordentown West, this electoral district, and Cayman Brac. And it's because we don't have voter education why people are confused about those situations and those anomalies into the voting system. And so yes, we need voter and civic education. We have been calling for this on this radio station ever since I came on here. I know you have been calling for it also. I don't know if that is a priority, but it should be a priority. It's a priority in any other country. I know, because I know when I went to different countries, I was surprised to see the young people who know their constitutions and who know who their prime ministers were, who know how their government works. And so voter education and civic education should be a priority, and it should be started from yesterday, from last night. They should have started it instead of us talking about it this morning.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Macfield. Let's see how much we can cover on campaign financing before we go to our news. And I'll very quickly read it. It says the existing provision, and remember now, this is in 2013. The existing provisions... okay. Before that, I should say voter and civic education. We can say attempts were made there. So we started that, but the work isn't complete.
No, the work is not. It's far from being complete already. Okay. We need to set up the system. Yeah. Of voter and civic education.
Right. Something permanent.
Something permanent. Yes.
And okay, we're not going to have enough time to do campaign finances, so why don't we stick with this? My question, we have seen over and over again, whenever consultations go out and you're seeking feedback from the general public, 9 times out of 10, they come back and say, oh, we need more time because I didn't get an opportunity. I didn't have a chance to look at this. I didn't have a chance to consider this. Sometimes with the approach that our people take in terms of their interest in things, unless it's the 11th hour, they have no interest in it. Can some of the blame be placed on the people too in terms of the interest, the amount of interest? I mean, take for instance when the Electoral Boundaries Commission was meeting, the low turnout in some districts.
That's right.
But yet you had all sorts of comments about it afterwards.
Yes.
How do we get our people interested? In terms of showing an interest in the educational process that we're trying to extend to them? Well,
we have to start early now, because I think a lot of people now is beyond them. They really don't care about these things. They mostly, it's what Haig said. They care about the belly. Politics now is through the stomach. They care about feeding their children and saving their house, saving their homes, and saving their motor cars. So we have to start with the other generation that's coming behind now if we really want to help this our society along. And so it's very unfortunate. We have never been a literal society. We have always been a very oral society, and that is a problem that we have. And that is the foundational problem of why we have so many problems with other people come from outside also, because they are more educated about voter civic and voter education than we are in their own country. Yep. And that's the reason why you see so many comments now also about the reason why they should have the vote in our country too.
Yep, and they're the ones that end up going to the commission and making representations as well. Yes. Please stay tuned, folks. For the record, we'll be back immediately after the 8 o'clock news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, my two co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. We're discussing the 2013 Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observer Mission report on the Cayman Islands elections in 2013, in particular their recommendation. Before I go there, I had an email that I missed on Friday, and that person added some more on there for today's comments as well. And it says, good morning, Mr. Connor and co-hosts. If you're reading this on Friday morning, please add my comments on today's topic. We have already given away too much of our country, our rights, and our heritage. Let's preserve what little we have left, including the right to vote. I was very pleased to hear that the Premier plans to focus on social issues. Nothing is more important, and I'll comment on that later. Friday's Compass informed us that one of the government's primary tasks will be to sort out immigration and reform the public sector's hiring mechanism. This begs the question why the public sector's efficient and internationally recognized hiring mechanism was dismantled. I raised this during the constitutional modernization process. Traditionally, civil service commissions evolve with the Constitution, and at independence, they take on more responsibility for the civil service. Surprisingly, the UK approved our Constitution without including a service commission. I'd like to hear your views on this. Dr. McField's learned comments on the purpose of commissions and the part they play in the UK and in other Commonwealth countries. So the person would like to hear some comments in relation to the purpose of commissions and the part they play in the UK, and the fact that we failed to include a service commission in our constitution, but yet the UK provided it. The UK approved their constitution that way. Well, they were actually part of the negotiations as well. And of course, the comment in relation to the fact that we certainly do not want to lose our right to vote in the Cayman Islands and give that up to someone else as well. So before we go to financing, any comments on those things, Mr.
Well, commissions are very important, especially in the UK. Most of the regulations and also public services are done by commissions. We had a public service commission here for many years, and it worked well. But I think the writer is forgetting that when we went to this new law that we adopted from New Zealand, that ousted the commission, especially when it came to hiring, and now the hiring now is done by heads of departments, by the chief officers now, and so there's no need for commission. But we need to go back there. I remember one of the stalwarts of the commission was Mr. Ormond Panton. I think Mr. Craddock Ebanks, and I think Mrs. DeConley was also a member of the Public Service Commission. And commissions in the UK and in other countries are very, very important because they regulate and they report and they observe and they keep intact the order of business, and they make sure there's no corruptions going on between the public sector and the private sector. It is a good checks and balances in government, and that's why it's very important that we have those.
And you see us highlighting the need for an electoral
one, yes.
commission here in the Cayman Islands. Financing, voter campaign financing, Mr. Risa.
What I was going to add also was they do a lot of research as well.
Yes.
And they do a lot of research, and the composition of the commissions as well is usually designed where you have a balance, and that also leads towards getting away from the kind of corruption that you would that could be encouraged. That was the comment I was going to make.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Risa, to read the recommendation made in 2013 in relation to campaign finance, and then the comment on this as well.
So it says that the existing provisions of the elections law could be reviewed in order to ensure meaningful scrutiny of campaign expenses declared by the candidates. Such a review could also reassess the current level of limits for campaign expenses and clarify the definition of election expenses, particularly regarding the prepaid services and goods used during the campaign period. Clearly defined, realistic, and enforceable campaign financing rules could reduce the role of money in elections and politics in general. Now, some of the notes that I made during the break with respect to this, and I wanted to start by asking ourselves and the audience, to what extent does money buy power? And what fosters trust in our political system? So the concern I have, and certainly as a candidate that ran before on a shoestring budget, what I spent when I ran for Bordentown was nothing close to what I see expended. I simply don't have that kind of cash. I never had anybody to go to. In fact, I had to get a small loan to go and and do what we did, and everything that we did was really on a shoestring budget. Literally, Kenrick Webster and I mean, we just work. Kenrick Webster and a very, very small group, 5 of us, is what you saw deliver really in Bordentown. And in addition, we had some supporters who came out and volunteered their services. Yeah. So, but I wanted to say that it is possible for us to have credible leaders who really, really have a heart and soul that want to meet the needs of the community. But when you have big money involved with involved with our politics, and I'm not saying necessarily that big money is bad. What I am saying is that when you have a preponderance of the campaign financing coming from 1% of our community, and that 1% makes up the moneyed class, there is almost invariably a disconnect between what they want. And I mean, these are folks now that are financing the campaigns for our guys or ladies that run in office. Their views and their interests are not necessarily the same as our views. And when I say our views, I'll use Dr. Linford Pearson's view about the little man, the small man on the street. Our interests may be with respect to our kids, our schools, and, ensuring that we have the money to pay our mortgage, ensuring that there's food on the table, ensuring that, we have a balanced life. Those interests might be diametrically opposed to what big businesses want. So now you see the discussion between whether or not we're going to have a port or whether or not we're going to use that money, for example, to develop air services. And the research shows us that money is better spent if you use it on air travel. Yet we have this conversation about how to spend the money as if we have money ad nauseum, as if we don't have to spend our money wisely. So that is an issue that I have. And then you don't have the kind of campaign donor information that we need. We need to really, and I was going to say this, Dr. Macfield, yes, we need to change the law about campaign financing. I would like us to go further. I'd like it to be in our Constitution, Dr. Macfield, about how we view campaign financing, and that is something I'm sure we can work on.
Mm-hmm. I was looking at a phrase here in that recommendation, to ensure meaningful scrutiny of it. That's important. Meaningful scrutiny, because it can be there and
we ignore it as we always do.
And then there may be nothing in there that you can really scrutinize.
Well, in other countries, for instance, in Canada, not only that political parties have to be registered, but they also have to have an organization inside the registration system. In other words, they have to have a qualified accountant and an auditor. And so that they have to have their books open, and every penny that they receive from campaign financing has to be open to the public so that the government can see.
And it shouldn't start to run.
It shouldn't start to run, Teresa, at nomination day.
Exactly.
It should be at every time that you get a donation from someone, and especially when you have large multinational corporations and people seeking lobbyists seeking favors from the government and giving money. That leads to corruption, and the problem is that we have to really go about this thing and fix the problem altogether, not in piecemeal. Yeah. We have a little piece now about the political parties, but we need to go and we need to do it very thoroughly.
Yeah.
Not only that, they have to register, but they have to show where they get their financing, who gave them, and what amounts that they have gotten from people, because it's very important that we do that.
Because we now live in a global community. We don't know, OC, if the funds originated from some kind of terrorist funding.
Exactly.
We don't know. So we there must be full and clear transparency. The other issue that I wanted to touch on was how we as a people become, because I see it happening all the time. Politicians get a very bad name because, and I was just sharing with you what was happening now in the Bahamas with corruption after this new government came in. In fact, there was an ad seeking politicians with integrity who have capacity and actually care about the people. What has happened is that people get disillusioned. When they see things happening over and over and over again, they're not motivated to come out and vote, because they say we're going to get more of the same. But to those folks, I say, don't get disillusioned. You stand and you start making changes for you and others you believe in to run and vote. Don't wait for persons to put themselves out there to go and run for office. You know what you need and what you want to see in your leadership. So you got to start from the individual perspective. If you want to develop an advocacy group or whatever, you start choosing persons who you believe is worthy of your vote. And then, of course, like I said, we need to accelerate the timetable for reporting, and we need to expand that reporting requirement. Those are some of the thoughts I had.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to go to a commercial break. And we can say that we partially fulfilled this recommendation to a certain extent. We did increase the amount, in terms of financing, but we didn't really do justice to the whole issue of campaign financing. So I would say we really haven't done much in relation to that recommendation as well. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing the 2013 Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observers Report on the 2013 elections in the Cayman Islands. That discussion is taking place with my co-host, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. So on the issue of campaign financing, I've made a note on my documents that we have not satisfactorily addressed that issue. We have not come anywhere near dealing, with it the way that it needs to be dealt with. Let's go on to treating of electors. The existing provisions in the elections law which forbid candidates to provide any food or drink at the campaign meetings could be reviewed in order to allow candidates to offer reasonable refreshments to the campaign meeting participants. I don't think that the law specifically prohibits, food or drink. I think it had to do with the interpretation of it.
Of treating.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that candidates would highlight, and it was almost like an asterisk there. Food will be provided as an attraction to get people there. So that was the whole idea. It looked as if they were using the food as a bait to get people there. And people,
and it shows you that these people do not actually understand our culture. Because Caymanians people is not going out to stand up and no eat unless you give them something, food and something to drink. Yeah. In fact, they're going to ask you if you have it, if you have it, if you're having the cool drinks there. So it goes to show you that they don't understand our culture, and so that's not. That is not considered an election offense in my book.
And some people carry a little flat plastic container with them to take home.
Take
it out.
Exactly, and that doesn't mean that they're going to vote for you, because they have an old saying: we're going to eat them out, drink them out, and vote them out. Yep. Yes, and I'll never forget what somebody told me about poor Mr. Anton Barton, what he had done to him. And he when he got up on the platform and he says, well, he says there's this campaign is all about three little words.
Those three little words.
Three little words, he says. Three little words. I'm going to say, well, Mr. Anton, what's it about? Get Anton out.
Okay, so we agree with this that
Yes.
this whole
Yeah.
issue about food and stuff like that. It's part of our culture. Allow them to
Yes.
feed, food. Well, one of the things that we should stipulate in it should be healthy food.
Healthy food, yes,
If anything,
yes.
yeah.
It should be Burger King food.
Yes.
Yes.
The next one is media regulation. Dr. Steve, can you read what it says about media regulation for us?
Yes, it says the election process would benefit from establishing the rules for conduct of public and private media during the election campaign period. Such rules could guarantee equitable access to the media for all contesting candidates, and particularly in case of public broadcasters. A media monitoring mechanism could be established to monitor whether media outlets adhere to the rules.
Okay. And what we saw here in the Cayman Islands is especially the private media, their interest is at that point in time revenue earning.
Revenue
As
earners,
much
they're
as
not
they
interested
could
in
get.
carrying the message out and to educate people about the election process, the elective process, and the election process. They're uninterested. In fact, I understand. I'm not. Subject to be corrected, but I understand that suddenly the price went up in some media houses for the work that they did. For instance, for being on the radio or for being on the television or whatever, the price went up significantly, and the media was not interested in promoting to the public what the candidate's message was or the candidate's message were, and that is a problem that we have, and that is and I have always suggested that this radio station should have a set of times for all candidates to come to get their message across to the public, not only for candidates but for the public.
Yeah. And I think Radio Cayman tried to do that as
Yes.
much as they possibly could. Yes.
Yes, but that is a problem that we have with the media, because if a candidate is poorer than the other candidates, he will not get his message across.
Okay, so this one, that was a recommendation in 2013. It doesn't seem as if that it was followed through on. We didn't really get much better. What we saw in 2017 was an increase in the price.
That's right.
As far as the private media was concerned.
But also the messaging, I didn't think that the messaging was necessarily independent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that some folks had a certain view, and those views were proliferated, and that comes, of course, when you don't have a truly and I know folks may take, and this is a personal view, it's not a Radio Cayman view, and I think, that's what happens when you don't have a truly independent press. Some of the things that we see that is written in the press, certain press, I ask myself, where do they live, and whose interests are they promoting? And that's, like I said, that's a personal view.
I share your personal view, because I think that it's not only subtle, it's very pertinent too.
Okay. Secrecy of the vote. An amendment to the elections law to remove the requirement that ballot papers contain serial numbers would guarantee the right to vote in secret. Alternative means of protecting the integrity of the ballot, such as the use of barcodes and embossing techniques, could be explored instead. I must say that when we compare this recommendation in 2013 as opposed to the 2017 recommendation, this one seems to be more reasonable than that one. And of course, we'll be looking at that in future shows. We will be looking at the 2017 recommendations. When we look at most of the Caribbean overseas territories, and not even in the independent countries, we have seen, and this is a relic of the UK's electoral system, the representation of the People's Act. That's
Yes.
what it is called in the UK. Our election laws were all basically designed with that law in mind, sometimes almost copied verbatim.
That's right.
In terms of what was in it. So identifying number on the counterfoil of the ballot paper as well as an identifying number on the ballot paper itself has always been there. Now, I must say that in my 33 years of working in the elections office, we have never had a case where you had to revert back, the courts had to revert back to the ballot papers to verify the vote of any individual. So if that hasn't happened in 30 years, and I believe another 30 years before that, it probably never happened. It begs the question, do we really, really need to have that serial number on? Then my answer to that would be, no, we don't need it, and that would remove a lot of the gossip that we hear and people being intimidated by being told by possibly candidates that don't worry, I can know how you voted or who you voted for. So we could certainly remove that. And they talked about the fact that you could have barcodes or certain things of that nature on there as well. So I would say that yes, this recommendation is something that should be. It has not been done yet, but the Cayman Islands, we are not the only country that still have that existing provision in our elections law. And
I agree with you.
I agree. I agree that wholeheartedly.
Okay. So that one could go. Coming up on a break, but we're going to mention the next one. First, voter identification, removing the requirement for voters to state their occupation when presenting themselves to vote could avoid demeaning situations in the case of some voters in terms of that. I think that is that's going a little bit too far. Anyone who has an occupation, who works, I would venture to say, proud to say what they do in terms of their work.
Yes.
Unless it is something that is forced upon them, that they're enslaved, then I don't see it.
I don't understand why they have that there at all. Even in the jury lists, they have your occupation, what you do, and the reason why they have that there is because there's a principle that you ought to be tried by a group of your peers, and so if you're an accountant, you wouldn't want to be tried by people who are ditch diggers.
Okay.
So you'd want to have bankers and accountants trying your case.
So we don't agree with that one, because in the whole and part of the process with that is again to ensure that there isn't personification of other people of a person.
Yes.
Now, if we do have the elector registration cards and we make that a requirement, then there may not be the need for to have that as well. Very quickly, let's look at the other one, assisting voting. I'm going to read it now. We're going to take a commercial break after I read it, and that'll give you, both of you, time to reflect on what we're going to comment about that. The elections law could reflect the practice established by the elections office that any person/friend can assist only one voter in marking the ballot paper. Secrecy of assisted voting could be increased if the process takes place behind the voting screen in a poll booth. Now, first of all, I have an issue with what they say here, that can assist one voter in marking the ballot paper. The friend does not assist. The friend is there to witness the proceedings, to ensure that the presiding officer is carrying out the wish of the voter, but the friend does not assist them. So they got that all wrong there as well. Let's go to a commercial break. When we return, the conversation and the critique of the 2013 Election Observers Report will continue. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, back to our discussions on the 2013 Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observers Mission to the Cayman Islands during our 2013 general elections. Just want to say one more thing about the assisting of the voting. The elections law could reflect the practice established by the elections office that any person or friend can assist only one voter in marking the ballot paper. Secrecy of assisted voting could be increased if the process takes place behind the voting screen in a polling booth. Let's take that and dissect it. First of all, the person or the friend does not assist the voter. That is done by the presiding officer under the directions of the voter. So the presiding officer will mark the ballot paper for the voter. If the voter requests that, the voter will tell the presiding officer the person for whom they want to vote for. That is all done in the open, but it is done quietly so that agents and candidates who may be present in the polling station, because they're strategically placed where they can see people as they enter, but they cannot see how a ballot paper is marked. So in terms of that happening in the open, I think that is better than the recommendation that they made that it should take place in the voting booth, because when they go into the voting booth, then questions could be asked. What is the presiding officer doing in there?
Yes.
So the friend is there to ensure that the presiding officer
does what the voter wants him to do.
Exactly, precisely. Let's go to mobile. So that one, we don't see any need to expand, on that. Mobile voting. The elections office could consider the introduction of mobile voting for those electors who are hospitalized in medical and social care facilities after the deadline for applications for mobile voting. At present, such voters were disenfranchised. So we did have the mobile voting, but there were situations that arose whereby, and we did have some people call in and for the record and put scenarios to us in terms of what happens if you get ill before the elections, you become ill before the elections, but you have not made an application for mobile voting because you didn't know what would happen in a situation like that. And their suggestion here is that we need to make provisions for that. What we want to ensure is that no one is disenfranchised by operation of the law.
And we could make provisions for that in a slight amendment to the elections law is all we need, really.
Yes. For that purpose.
Yes.
Postal voting. Elections office together with the Postmaster General could examine all current available options for sending the postal ballots in order to ensure that as far as possible all postal ballots are delivered to the electors and subsequently to the returning officers in a timely manner. And we have seen changes that have been made in that regard as well. At one point in time, the requirement was that it had to be sent by
registered posts.
And that has changed now, where you can courier services can be used as well. It can be delivered by hand up until before the close of the polls. Those postal ballots can be returned as well. So we have moved ahead with those recommendations, and we saw them take place in the 2017 general elections. Any comments on anything in relation to the postal voting as well?
There were just a few hiccups on this last election, but that was because there were problems with wrong addresses, and there were problems with because we didn't get the postal vote ballots out late.
Yes.
And that was because the law was not changed late.
And also the challenges that
yes.
because of the challenges that were in the court, some ballot papers could not be
Sent
printed
out.
until they
Exactly.
had been resolved in terms of whether or not a candidate was eligible to
vote or not,
to
run or not to run.
Yes. Okay, and then the final one. They had a comment in 2013 on domestic observers themselves. It says establishing an institute of domestic observers independent from the elections office with clearly defined rights, responsibilities, and accreditation requirements in the elections law would increase the public oversight and confidence of the elections process. Now, they made this recommendation. We, Mr. Colonel Gomez, the supervisor of elections, decided that in addition to having overseas observers, that we should have our own domestic observers as well. And their recommendations in that regard talks about, they agree with that and said it should be done now. What is going to be interesting is when we look at the 2017 recommendation, they take a much stronger view on this and talk about the fact that the supervisor of elections should not be allowed to appoint election observers because of the fact that the domestic observers are going to be observing the work of the supervisor of elections
and his office.
And so as a result of that, so that may have some credibility to it. In 2013 they didn't put it in such language. They just simply said that we need to establish an institute of domestic observers that should be independent from the elections office, which they're basically saying the same thing. Now, I would venture to say, if we can't get an elections commission, we're not likely to get an institute.
Yes.
But here again, we have an opportunity to develop our own local expertise, to pave the way, to put us on that footing that when at some point in time, because it's going to happen, folks, it's going to happen. Not every generation is going to want to remain under the stronghold of the British government, that when we get the big I, independence, that we have all of those
institutions
in place, right, to ensure that there's credibility, that we can demonstrate to people that we know how to run our own affairs. Comments, please.
I think it goes without doubt. In fact, I mean, I said this kind of like tongue in cheek when we were speaking over the weekend. We have the expertise right in this room. I know it might sound a little arrogant. It's not intended to be arrogant, but, and this is something that I don't understand about us as a people, in that we know who are capable, and we know the expertise that we have, but there's a certain grudge, there's a certain something that prevents us from acknowledging this wealth of expertise that we have, because it may suggest that, we actually embrace, accept, and acknowledge our own. I don't know when we're going to get past that, Steve. Because, we just keep spending money as if it's water, or as my mom would say, spending money like it growing on tree. And what we do, we're creating a debt and leveraging debt for our children and our grandchildren. I just can't make sense of that. I really can't. Can you help me understand here?
Throughout this history of the Cayman Islands, we first of all, women in Caymanian society, men were away at sea working and everything else. We disenfranchised them up until a certain point in time. Our own women, our own Caymanian women. We saw it with
Stick a pin, our own women that built the private sector that we now talk about today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our refusal to select a Caymanian speaker of our legislative assembly, and that went on and on up until 1992, I believe it was. I have to look. I was reading. I did some research.
Yeah.
Well, Miss Sybil.
Miss Sybil
Miss Sybil,
McLaughlin.
Miss
Yes.
Sybil, yeah.
So again, no belief, this distrust, or sometimes because it's not me. If it can't be me, I don't want it to be anyone else.
That's what I'm talking about. That grudge, that thing.
So we constantly do it. We constantly do it. So look at the head of some of our commissions now as well. Who do we put there? Not Caymanians.
Yes.
Not native Caymanians, but we put others, at the head of our own commission. We continuously trying to demonstrate that we can't do it ourselves. And it's not the man on the street or us that are doing that. It's the powers that be showing that we can't do it ourselves. KPMG, was that the one? Which was the most recent one for the immigration and
$143,000.
Yeah, Deloitte.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
How many
Yeah.
staff members of Deloitte who are Caymanian that you think are going to be involved in that review process?
Or indeed have articulated the issues as we have on this show.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't. It's one thing for someone to say that you're inadequate or to say that you're silly, you're dumb, and so on. But it's another thing when we wear that jacket voluntarily. And I mean, it speaks to the comment that Roy made in his book about voluntary slavery as well. I'm not sure when we're going to get to that place where we are proud enough of each other, not just proud of our Caymanians as athletes, but proud enough of us where we choose folks who are intellectually bright as well. You know, it takes different skill sets to be able to pull a plethora of thoughts and make them make sense. But no one knows this better than we do. You know, when we look at the comments that were made by the observers, those observers can't speak to how we have meetings, for example, and when we have food there. Someone sent me a note about Dwayne Seymour's not party, but his celebration party that he had, and how it was prepared by his mom and people that she knew, because she knew the flavor that she wanted to communicate to celebrate the victory of those in Bordentown. You know, that's an innate cultural thing. That is not somebody from the outside can come in and replicate. You know, so I would like to encourage our listeners, and certainly those of us in this room, to think about ways in which we can start to think about things that embrace us, embrace our culture, and, you know, embrace who we are, and evolve into a better and more meaningful community and grow.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. My co-host in the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField. We have just concluded the discussion of the 2013 Election Observer Mission Report on the Cayman Islands elections. We didn't think we would have enough time to start on the current one, but we're going to start with that when we return. So please stay tuned. The discussion will continue. We're not getting a whole lot of calls, but we know why. You are listening intently to what we have to say here. And we're going to continue to say it. We're going to put it, you know, as clear and as concise as possible so that all and sundry can understand exactly what we're saying. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning, and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Dr. Steve McField and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, my two co-hosts, and we're looking at the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observer Missions Report to the Cayman Islands. We have just concluded the 2013 recommendations, and we're looking at the 2017 one. I'm told that we have a caller online. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Miss Teresa.
Good morning,
and
Miss
good
Georgia.
morning to Dr. Steve.
Good morning, ma'am.
You know this is Georgette.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess you recognize my voice. And I trust that all of you are, each individual there, that you're well, and your family members are well too. Because Miss Teresa and Dr. Steve and OC too, that's the old Cayman way. You always want to know how you meet somebody, you want to know how that family is. But Miss Teresa, sweetheart, you used a word I hadn't heard in many years. Grudge. Grudge. As a child or even a young woman, quite often you would hear people use that word. And you used it correctly when you were speaking a while ago. We know, all of us know, you people sitting there, and many people, I'm sure, who are listening. We have very intelligent men and women, but oh my goodness, the part that I might say, oh yes, I believe she's very intelligent, but you look at the family she coming from, or look at that man. I know he's intelligent too, but you remember what his grandfather did? And people hold grudges. And that's what's happening in King. It's been happening for many years. And it's going to continue to happen. And then I'll leave you, because I know you all are, I hope you all believe in God and have read your Bible at times. And in the Bible it says, a prophet has no honor in his own country. And that's what's happening in Cayman. Oh, if you're a Caymanian, you're just about a nobody. But every foreigner that comes, oh my goodness, I have to get off my hobby horse now, because I might say something that I regret. But God bless you all, and also all the people on our three islands. Thank you, Mr. O.C., for giving me all the time to run up my mouth.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms.
Thank you.
Georgette, for that. And I know on Friday that we had some difficulties in terms of connecting with Ms. Georgette. Okay, so we're going to look at the recently published report by the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association observers. And first of all, the created a stir because some people were questioning, well, legislators have not gotten it. It was published on the CPA's website before it was disseminated locally. I'm not able to confirm or deny any of those. I do know that I received a copy of it on an email, and it came from the UK actually when I received it. The recommendation sections, it says the election observer mission wishes to offer recommendations to the people of the Cayman Islands, to the government, as well as to institutions of state and civil society. These recommendations might be considered in a review of the electoral process in order to further enhance the realization of human rights and comply with the international legal obligations of the Cayman Islands, while also emulating models of best practice. And then it goes on to talk about the legal framework, of the Cayman Islands. And then recommendation number 1, it would be important in any review of the Constitution order to consider the continued reasonableness of the pertinent provisions, particularly the duration of residence requirements, in light of the mobility of the population of the Cayman Islands and of the contribution made by diverse expatriate community residents here. Okay. So it says here that in any review, so they're not saying that we should specifically review the Constitution in this regard, but if we're going to undertake any review of the Constitution, that should be factored into that review, which is the residency requirements, the duration of residency in the Cayman Islands. Who wants to take that and parse that a little bit more?
Well, OC, I have some problems with the residency requirements and in our Constitution now. we cannot. You have to be resident. That means you have to be residents for 7 years before the last 7 years before the nomination day. And out of the 7 years, you cannot remain outside the Cayman Islands for more than 400 days. And then there are all these exceptions. If you're a student at a recognized institution, if you're working on a ship, if you are working on an aircraft, or if you are a patient in a hospital, or if you are working for the Cayman Islands government, that's an exemption. I think that is quite honorary and onerous, and it really should be abolished. I think a Caymanian, a person who is registered to vote, should have his registration continue to vote. It doesn't matter how long he's away from the island, as long as he keep in contact with his country. And I think that every other civilized country in the world, I think, has that extended right to vote. In America, you can vote from in election. If you live in here, you can vote from there, and it doesn't matter how long you have been living here, as long as you keep your American citizenship going. Canada is the same way. I think Great Britain is the same way. So I think that old requirement system in our law that says you have to be present. Your presence has to be here for 7 years, and you cannot be absent more than 400 days. I think that is quite old fashioned, and it should go, because it disenfranchise a lot of people who otherwise would be voting from abroad.
Now, they have also taken note of the fact, and this is important, very important, and I think we can appreciate this comment that they have made as well. They point out that the Elections Amendment Law 2016 was assented to just only 6 months in advance of polling day. And we talked about this fact that, when we talk about public education and everything else. It says, while international best practice indicates that laws should not be changed within 1 year of an election. So if we're going to implement new things, it should be done at least 1 year before an election.
Well, if we are going to implement any of these recommendations from 2013 or from 2017, they should be start now. We should not wait. You remember we were asking, when are the laws going to be changed to bring in the one person, one vote, single member constituency? And they said, well, they're going to do it after this time. They're going to do it after this time. And so they got caught, and they were late getting some things done. So it should be done now. There should be a commission set up to implement these recommendations and rewrite the law where it has to be done, or to amend the Constitution where the Constitution has to be amended.
Okay. Now, I want to point out that this is all, these recommendations have to do with the legal framework. They put it under various topics. So this has to do with the legal framework. We have one caller, Ms. Susan. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hi, good morning, everyone there.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hi, it's Lorna Bush. I haven't listened to everything this morning because I've been in and out of the car, so I just caught some snippets. But I know generally you're speaking about the elections and the review and all of that. I have to say, and this is to something that Teresa said a little earlier, that we shouldn't say, hey, I'm not going to go back out and vote, I'm not going to be a part of the process and all of that. But I have to tell you that as someone who's paid such keen interest and taken, been involved in many capacities, after this most recent election, I really found myself wondering, does any of it really make sense? Does any of it, make sense? Because the lack of political maturity in the Cayman Islands lets me see that it doesn't matter. We don't get change. We do not. It doesn't matter if we even get a few new people in there. The new people who are now a part of the government that I was expecting so much from are saying things to me like, well, I'm only one person. I can't do this. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Another one who spent all of his time on the radio criticizing the way government works,
is now telling me that he has to wait and see how government works before he can do anything, you know? I thought he had studied how government works. And then the final icing on this whole cake for me was really just this past weekend that we're now going to pay another consultant firm to review our immigration. And our people will sit down and listen to that and not get into an uproar, knowing that the last one that we paid $300 and something thousand to David Rich still hasn't been released for us to even know what was there. And we, the people who pay all of our hard-earned money into government coffers, are prepared to sit down and see Deloitte or Ernst & Young or whoever it is get more of our money to review a system that you rightly said. The expertise to review that, sitting right in the studio, you are the three people that I'm speaking to right now. But the Caymanian psyche says you can't use Mr. Orrit Connor, who for so many years did the job. You can't use Steve McField, who knows the laws more than anybody that I can think of. And, of course, you can't use Teresa Pitcairn because of what? What exactly is it we have against her? You know what it is? It is this class system that still controls the Cayman Islands. It is this merchant class, or, well, I don't think we call it merchant class anymore. It is the corporate entities. It's the Chamber of Commerce, the people who are controlling the government. Our government is controlled by a very small, just a handful. And if you're not in that circle, then it don't make sense to go out and vote. It don't make sense to do anything. I am so disillusioned, disenfranchised that right now, the way that I'm thinking, since we're already living in what I consider to be a dictatorship of sorts, but we don't have any of the benefits of socialism, I'm going to move to our mother country, which is socialism at its best, where at least I can get the benefit of free medical, I can get free education for my grandchildren. Cayman, I'm writing this thing off, man. This was an experiment gone terribly wrong. I don't think it will be corrected in our lifetime.
We can still do that. Don't give up hope for our caller.
No, but right now we need to start a revolt about this immigration review that we're going to pay this money to. Let the premier and the governor and the rest of them see that we're not going to accept that. It is ludicrous. It is foolish. It's a waste of money. We have not seen the results of the last review. Why? It didn't produce the results that they wanted. So you're going to go to a company that you know you can manipulate, and they will give you what you're looking for. This is so wrong on so many levels. And I know I don't have any more energy to fight. And what I cannot do is sit down and be a part of it, just be complacent, just be a part of a very crooked, ridiculous class system. I can't do it anymore.
Thank you very much.
When you look at last election and see how a certain person could enter the race in a district, two in particular, Georgetown West and Georgetown South, where you had great candidates campaigning for a year or 2 years in advance, and they could enter broomsticks at the last minute and they win just because of who they are. No, I'm done. Done.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. We're going to a commercial break now. When we return, the conversation will continue. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We have one more caller on hold. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Another wonderful program.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. McField.
Good morning. Good morning, my
Morning,
friend.
sir.
Mr. Adams, good morning.
Good morning. Now, I've been listening to most of your program today, in and out. I just heard the last caller. And what I would tell her is that us young 19-year-olds who refuse to mature, who refuse to grow up, who refuse to have patience with stupidity, also recognize of this exercise in futility that is being done on the immigration reform. Now, here's the stupidity of it. Immigration is policies, are not policies in isolation. Immigration policies are to implement the policies of the central government and the central direction that government wants to take. The same is true for planning. Let's just take two aspects. A development plan will take a country in the direction where the country wants to go after you have a plan. You want it to be an industrial, you want it to be an open plan area for that type of tourism. You want to have it for gambling. Then you facilitate your plans, your development accordingly. But without a country policy plan and the subsequent plans that come from it, e.g., the development plan and immigration laws, these people that are going to work on this immigration law, and I see, Mr. Risa, it also encompasses labor and pension. So they've started to expand it already, which again, it can only be done and make sense if it does include these things. But it's being done in isolation. We no longer have an opposition party in the Legislative Assembly. You have CDP, UDP, PPM are now blended into one. And that's like mixing milk and lime juice. And that is where we have ended up. And we have enough people that are drinking it. Some think they're drinking limeade. The rest think that they're drinking milk. But they're going to get pain in the belly. Okay, because you're not even going to get cottage cheese out of that spoiled milk. So this is the confusion that they're putting on our people out there. And the lack of planning, it is just so frustrating to watch money being wasted on all of these plans and all of these studies. $300,000 to do what?
So caller, in terms of the immigration review, what is your recommendation? Hello, caller?
Yes, I'm right here. The immigration review should come after the country has decided the direction where it wants to go with population.
But do we have to? Do we have time? Do we have time for that, or do we have to do both in tandem? Immigration is a serious issue at this point in time. It's serious for Caymanians. It is serious for those persons who are seeking to remain here by whatever means necessary. So we can't put it off.
Okay, here's where I fully agree with you to a certain extent. What we need is honesty and a development of trust. And what we're getting is more of the three-shell magician's game to fool us. And here's what's happening. Both political parties, leaders, want to take this island to a population of 100,000 people. They have both said that. They're doing that to satisfy their master controllers, the people that are nowadays not even behind the curtain pulling the levers. They're out in the open. They are developing commercial facilities for a population of 100,000 plus and continue to do it. Therefore, their servants, the politicians, to serve their ends, have their publicity organ that's well in place and well doing the job and pulling the wool over people's eyes, and they are there trying to get 100,000. So don't tell me that you are going to genuinely look at an immigration for any form of population control.
Okay, and that is where
you want to make it automatic for anybody who want to come.
That's where the public has to get involved in it. Caller, we're going to ask you to leave us there because we're running out of time. But this is where we have to have the public involved. The public have to have their say in terms of this whole review process. We have one more caller that we're going to try to accommodate before we have our our closing comments. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C. Good morning,
Morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Steve and Doc and Teresa sir.
Good morning,
morning,
sir.
sir.
Good morning.
I couldn't agree with Lorna more than how she said it. And then Billy backed it up. That is our trouble. We don't want to take no responsibility for anything for ourselves. We don't need no group to tell us what the trouble is here. We got more now than we can handle. What happened to all those that don't have a job? And, it just seems they can't get nowhere with it. We don't need nobody from outside to come and tell us how to handle the immigration system. What we need is someone who has the courage and the honesty to sit down and work it out. But don't do it all by themselves. Include the public. We got sensible people. We got smart people. We got people with the best intentions in the world. But until they're given a chance, all we can do is row over the air.
Mm-hmm.
We need our elected representatives to understand this, that we're not going to put up with this anymore. Hiring people to take the money and tell us what they want to tell us. No deal. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. Any comments before we have your closing comments?
It's kind of sad because what Lorna and the other members of the public have just shared is what I hear all the time, which is why I introduced it in the comments that I made when we were talking about campaign financing. It's kind of sad, but when the gentleman just said that we need to let our politicians know, they know. And this was what I was trying to share a few weeks ago when I said that we need to own what happens politically. If we're not paying attention, or if through our silence we give our politicians permission to continue to behave badly and to continue to waste our hard-earned money. Because remember, that money is going to folks who already got cash, and we have so many families that need the money. That is just waste. We have to be honest. It's just, but we sit back and for some reason think that we don't have a voice, we don't have the ability, we are incapable. We sit back and we observe our government waste our money, and we say nothing. And then people like me, I'm penalized for saying the obvious,
Dr. Markfield?
Well, I wish I had stayed the way I used to be when I was 18 and 19 years old, politically ignorant and academically dumb. And then I would get along, because what they would have done, they would have pat me on my back and say, you, what's his name, boy? And they would give me a job and I would be okay. But when you get into this system where you become, you go out into the world and you know what they know, because you read the same books and
you know more than they
know, and you go and you see how their society works, and you understand how they works, then you become an enemy. And I have been saying this a long time, trying to educate the Caymanian people about the system that we have and the system that they have brought to us. And it seems to me now that we don't have the old merchant class anymore now, tying a cow up by the bar and saying, if you vote for me, you can butcher, but if you don't vote for me, it's going back into the grass piece. And we don't have the 10 shilling notes now. And as one governor wrote, we don't have the rum now that dictates who get elected, the handout of the rum, flask of rum that dictates who get into the legislative assembly now. We have the very powerful developer exploiter now who comes now and seems to be able to push all of them, not 10 chilling notes, but $10 million and $5 million around, and we fall for that. But somebody was asking me the other day just about whether or not we had any, there were in the history of any non-Caymanians in our legislature. Mm-hmm. And I just did a little research.
Okay.
The first non-Caymanian to sit in our legislature was a man called Nathaniel Glover, who was a Boston merchant. He came here. He was one of the richest merchants in Cayman Islands who lived in Borden Town, and he got married to one of the Bordens. And he got elected at Cathedral St. James in 1831. And after they discovered that he was not a British subject, he had to vacate his seat. The other non-Caymanian who got elected in the Cayman Islands was C. L.H. Gorin in 1911. But Gorin became a Caymanian. He was a magistrate, a law agent, and a school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And
from Barbados?
From Barbados, and one of the most learned men. In fact, in 1937, when he died, Commissioner Sir Alan Cardinal said that he was one of the most educated men that he had ever met. But other than those two, they were the only two people who were not born in the Cayman Islands who sat in our legislative assembly.
Okay. I want to thank both my co-hosts with me this morning for, again, a very interesting and enlightening discussion here on For the Radio. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. To say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. I'm not sure if Sterling Dwayne Ebanks is back yet, but if he isn't, then I believe Mr. Gilbert McLean will continue to guest host for him. When we return on Wednesday, we're going to start all over again with the points and the recommendations of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observer Mission to the Cayman Islands. We're going to start with the legal framework, where they talk about the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 that sets out the fundamental rules which determine the entitlement of to political participation, and the fact that they said that the mission notes that the issues raised by long-term residents are of a constitutional nature in terms of long-term residents' ability to participate in the electoral process in the Cayman Islands. We need to look and really scrutinize this document to see how much they found out from Caymanians and how much they sought out the views of Caymanians as well. We will do all of that on Wednesday. So folks, have a great day, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three wonderful, beautiful Cayman Islands.
For the informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.